This is Storm Watch, a Fox 7 weather special, presented by Abacus Plumbing, Air Conditioning, and Electrical. You can count on us.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Fox 7 Storm Watch special. I'm John Krinjak. Central Texas is a hotbed for extreme weather, and we see it all from tornadoes to ice storms, wildfires to flash floods. Over the next half hour, we're going to be taking you inside these severe weather events and delving into what you need to know to stay safe.
We get hail, we get lightning storms, we get torrential rain, we may see tornadoes.
We also get tropical weather, we get hurricanes.
Wildfires are extremely dangerous.
Central Texas weather. We see it all, and it all can change at a moment's notice.
Thunderstorms are fascinating. They are one of my favorite types of weather. However, they are extremely dangerous.
What's it like for you forecasting just such a wide range of weather?
I love it. It's something to do different every day.
Our weather notorious for its extremes, from 30 to 80 degrees in just hours, or from a drought to a deluge in just a day.
They often call us Flash Flood Alley.
But whatever the weather, the Fox 7 weather team is here for you.
We just want you to be prepared.
And that's why it's so important to have a plan in place for every single type of weather event.
Exactly 3 months ago, we experienced a crippling ice storm that made roads impassable, caused millions of dollars in damage, and knocked out power for days. I spoke with Chief Meteorologist Scott Fisher, who says another storm like this isn't out of the question. For winter storm-weary Central Texans, this was the last thing they wanted to see and hear earlier this year.
It hit about 3 a.m. and you could hear the trees starting to collapse.
Back in early February, an ice storm brought down tree limbs and knocked out power to thousands in our area. Some of those outages lasted more than a week.
We got more than I was expecting, so it's pretty bad.
Pretty bad, even with the nightmare winter storm of 2021 still in the rearview mirror. When it hit 2 years ago, record cold temperatures, a crippling ice storm, and a power system that couldn't keep up proved to be a deadly combination.
It becomes super dangerous because you're talking about the lack of heat, the lack of ability to be safe.
All told, the 2021 winter storm led to some 250 deaths statewide.
If you're talking about an ice storm, usually freezing rain is the culprit.
So what causes freezing rain? How common is it here in Central Texas?
Freezing rain, very unique, probably the most rare of the frozen stuff. Freezing rain is when you've got your snow, it falls, it melts, and then it stays liquid almost all the way down to the ground. And then it splats out, it freezes, you can't walk on it, you can't drive on it, you can't move on it. It's worse than snow when it comes to travel. It's worse than sleet when it comes to travel. It's worse than rain when it comes to travel. It's bad.
Generally speaking, snow and sleet are more common than freezing rain here in Central Texas, largely because freezing rain requires just the right ingredients to form.
You got to think of the atmosphere sort of like a sandwich. There's a layer, there's a layer, there's a layer. You need a tiny little layer of cold air at the bottom, and you need a much warmer layer above, and then you need your cold layer at the top.
The cold layer at the bottom means what would otherwise just be wet is instead sheer ice. And during this year's winter storm, that ice was everywhere. There was a lot of ice. People were without power, some for several days. What do people need to think about when it comes to being prepared for something like that?
Number one, you don't want to travel. You want to avoid the roads because the roads are icy, the bridges are icy, the overpasses are icy. Number two, we saw the lack of preparation when it came to the trees. The rain hits the tree on any given rainy thunderstorm day, and it moves right off. The ice absolutely sticks. It's called accretion. It's the buildup of the ice. And all of a sudden, instead of being a couple of raindrops on the leaf, you get literally what could be ounces, and that's a lot, and the limbs have nowhere to go but crash on down.
Our saving grace this year was the fact that, unlike 2021, the cold didn't last for long. meaning although people were stuck without power, they weren't also stuck in frigid temperatures. But Scott hopes the damage and the fallout from the storm, the messy cleanup and slow power restoration is a teachable moment for people when it comes to making sure trees and other vegetation are properly maintained.
We know that if you do trim your tree, you've got a whole less likely scenario where that tree is going to fall over onto a power line and you're going to lose power.
Late last month, President Biden approved a major disaster declaration for parts of Central Texas still recovering from the storm. And with 2 significant ice storms in less than 2 years, Scott says we need to rethink our notion of how common they really are. We hear things like, once in a 100-year kind of storm. Is something like that the kind of thing that could happen again in your view?
Absolutely. It could happen next year. It could happen 3 years in a row. It might not happen for 30 years, but it's not once in a 100-year type of thing.
Severe weather season can bring the perfect storm with destructive lightning, hailstones, and tornadoes. Coming up, we'll break down how these storms develop into record-breaking events. Stay with us.
This is Storm Watch, a Fox 7 weather special.
Welcome back. Spring is prime time for severe weather here in Central Texas, from fast-moving thunderstorms to destructive tornadoes. They can strike at a moment's notice, and that means you need to be prepared for anything. I sat down with meteorologist Carlo Falco to talk about how these storms materialize and why they can be so dangerous. Thunder and lightning, hail, destructive winds, and yes, even tornadoes. We're in the heart of severe weather season in Central Texas. So why do we see so many storms this time of year?
What we have is we still have the poles, which are very cold. We have the Gulf of Mexico, which is always very warm, and the kind of fighting back and forth between the two of them is what causes the thunderstorms.
That plus an active jet stream is what takes these storms to the next level.
Turns what could be just kind of a pleasant afternoon thunder shower into this raging torrent of hail, wind, possibly tornado.
Speaking of tornadoes, we've seen our share in Central Texas over the past year or so, from Granger to Round Rock, Gerald to Salado.
We have a history of tornadoes. We certainly can see and do see tornadoes. However, thankfully, we are not in like the bullseye location for tornadoes in the country.
Yeah, but even though they're not quite as severe as some of those other ones, they can still be destructive.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, any tornado is a bad tornado.
Last spring's twisters leaving huge debris fields, destroying churches and leveling homes.
They have a long way to go when it comes to cleanup,
with some communities still recovering 1 year later. And this past October, yet another tornado touched down in Williamson County, causing major damage to Gerald's fire station. Is it typical to see 2-3 tornadoes in a season here?
Oh, yeah.
What are the ingredients that are necessary for a tornado to form?
You need warm air. You need a temperature difference, you need a lot of humidity, and crucially, this is the most difficult part, you need a jet stream to be set up just right, because a thunderstorm doesn't naturally like to spin.
So is that the key thing that you guys are looking for when you're tracking these storms, is when that rotation starts?
Yes, that's the biggest thing. That's called, we look for what's called a mesocyclone.
When you hear EF1, EF2, what do those rankings mean on the scale?
So crucially, they are a damage scale.
So unlike a hurricane where you're measuring intensity, with a tornado, you're actually measuring the impact, the damage.
Yeah, so it's kind of a retroactive assignment of damage versus a hurricane is a proactive assignment of intensity.
But as we've seen over the past couple years, you don't need a tornado to cause serious damage. You see, this is what's left of the side wall. 2 years ago in Bertram, buildings that had been standing for more than a century were all but demolished by straight-line winds.
That can blow through windows, that can, with the pressure difference, blow the roof off of houses, and, at worst, toss cars.
What's more likely to damage your car, though, is hail, and we've seen a lot of it lately. How exactly does hail form? It's one of those phenomena that I don't think people really understand.
Yeah, it is kind of strange to think that, you know, you're going to get these giant chunks of ice which are falling out of the sky when typically it's just rain. And basically what it is, you need a very strong updraft. So in this case, the updraft is a vertical moving batch of wind which takes the rain as it's falling, turns it around, and blows it back up into the atmosphere. It gets above the freezing level, it freezes into an ice chunk.
The more those chunks get blown around in the freezing air, the bigger the hail can get.
Can get, you know, baseball-sized hail, softball-sized hail.
The good news, if any of this destructive and dangerous weather heads our way, we're talking about a tornado warning. You can count on the Fox 7 weather team to be on the air, online, and on your phone to let you know.
We have ourselves this tornado warning which goes all the way through until 9:15.
When you guys break into programming and you say, hey, we've got some severe weather, why is it so important that people listen?
So when we break in, we never take it lightly. We always have a reason, and it's always going to be because there is potential life or property damage coming.
Deadly floods have washed through Austin over the decades, and that's why the area has come to be known as Flash Flood Alley. Despite the nickname, this spring, low lake levels remain a concern for farmers and boaters. We'll explain next on Fox 7 Stormwatch. While we have seen some flash flooding recently, overall, a majority of Texas does remain in a drought. Short term, that's a problem for farmers, boaters, and anyone who wants to water their lawn. But long-term, worsening droughts could mean our water supply just isn't enough to meet demand. Flash flooding wreaking havoc in parts of our area in the past couple weeks. Dozens of people had to be rescued from their cars when a rainstorm hit northwest Austin late last month.
I thought I was going to die.
My car just started going sideways.
This was the scene along 183 as floodwaters quickly rose and people tried to drive through. That proved to be a mistake, with crews pulling drivers from the rushing water.
They tell you to turn around, don't drown, turn around.
Not far from there, this neighborhood was flooded with debris from February's ice storm clogging drains, making a bad situation worse. But rainfall like this has been more the exception than the rule this spring, according to meteorologist Zack Shields. Have we made a dent in that drought?
No. We've had some nice rains here and there, but not enough. We've slowed down the rainfall deficits and the drought a little bit, but we need a lot more rain, and we need that rainy season to really deliver this year.
The drought is especially bad in the hill country. Take a look at these drone shots over Lake Travis, land that would normally be underwater, now above it. Lake Travis is about 30 feet below its average for this time of year. Lake Buchanan about 10 feet below. And get this, in the past couple months, the amount of water flowing into these reservoirs has only been about 16% of the normal intake.
So that tells us that, yes, we've had some rain in the hill country, but that dry ground is soaking it up. And we're not having a lot of runoff into the creeks and streams that feed into the Highland Lakes.
As a result, Austin remains under Stage 1 drought restrictions and has been since last May.
Well, if we don't get our normal spring rains, we may have to go to Stage 2 water restrictions by summer. We'll have increased fire danger, and then the ranchers and farmers will start to feel that struggle.
Do you feel that we're getting just drier over time?
We're seeing more extreme weather events, and that does include droughts.
That drought dilemma is something scientists from UT are studying in partnership with the city of Austin.
That would be a very big problem.
They're analyzing climate models to figure out what the long-term implications of worsening droughts will be for our city's water supply.
With intensified warming in the future, droughts will be lasting longer and they will be stronger.
And with the Central Texas population expected to soar in the coming decades, experts say demand for water will only soar as supply dwindles. Researchers hope their findings will lead to solutions before we find ourselves in a crisis. So given what you're seeing now, if we don't do anything, are we going to have enough water in the future?
That's a billion-dollar question. We could end up without enough water here.
But Zack says there is some potential good news on the horizon.
So right now it looks like we're going to go into an El Nino weather pattern starting this summer and continuing all the way through next spring. For the last 2.5 to 3 years, La Nina has been the name of the game, meaning the storm track has been shifted to the north because of that, and we've had less rain events. Now we're going to see a flip-flop in that, hopefully, starting this summer and especially fall and winter. That's when we really start to see an uptick in the rainfall events. So it may take a while to see a major shift in the weather pattern, but eventually it's coming.
Welcome back. Well, May is Wildfire Awareness Month, and here in Central Texas, the risk is much higher than we've seen in years past just because of that ongoing drought situation. I spoke with Fox 7 meteorologist Adaleigh Rowe, who says in the months ahead, we could be looking at a record wildfire season. Central Texas wildfires, they're fast.
Once you hear those evacuation warnings, you need to leave.
They're unpredictable.
They go whatever direction that the wind is blowing in.
And they're happening more often.
We've got a La Nina, which has contributed to warmer weather and drier weather. The plants start dying. That just adds fuel to the fires if they do start.
When we hear about wildfire risk, things like low risk and moderate and extreme risk, what factors go into that?
So the big things that we look at is humidity. So with low humidity values, there's less moisture in the air and it's easier for those fires to ignite. Another thing that helps them spread or even catch is the wind. And of course, temperatures, warmer temperatures, more heat adds fuel to those fires. And when those are all in perfect conditions for fires to spread, that's when you have your critical or extreme risks.
Meteorologist Adaleigh Rowe says wildfires can happen any time of the year, but unlike other places, Texas actually has 2 peak fire seasons.
One in summer into fall, and then another one you have from winter into spring.
Because of the lack of rainfall that we've seen for the last year or so, how bad do you expect this season to be?
Well, last year was the worst season that we have seen since 2011. And in 2011, there was a Bastrop complex fire that was, very widespread. I think it was 34,000 acres that burned.
2 people were also killed in that historic blaze after 3 separate fires merged into one. It took a month to put it out, and it was one of the most destructive fires in Texas history. Fast forward to last August, another wildfire tore through Bastrop. It burned close to 1,000 acres, but thankfully no one was hurt. Also in August, the Big Sky wildfire burned about 1,500 acres northeast of Fredericksburg, destroying several barns and sheds. And as that fire was burning, the Smoke Rider fire broke out near the Blanco-Hays County line.
Started with like a half an acre and it just took off.
The fast-moving blaze destroyed 3 houses and 1 mobile home, officials evacuating dozens of homes.
Last year, we had over 12,000 wildfires, and conditions really haven't gotten that much better. The drought started really to pick up in the fall of 2021, and we still have a widespread drought, so it could definitely be another record year.
It's a risk that Austin City Council member Allison Alter wants the city to be prepared for.
Wildfire is everyone's fight, even if you're not right on the edge of a wildland-urban interface area. The risk is real.
Council has taken steps to come up with a land management plan, and Alter has helped develop the FireWise program to educate people about wildfires. Here in Austin, she says it's not a matter of if, but when.
We've had brush fires, we've had things. They haven't gotten out of control because we've been managing them and we have resources on the ground. We've been lucky, though, and hopefully that luck will hold through the summer, and we ought to be prepared either way.
And that preparation is on all of us. After all, 90% of wildfires are started by people. What are some steps people can take to prevent wildfires and make sure we're not contributing to them?
Yeah, so you just be extra careful. You don't want to throw a cigarette out your windows. When welding, be extra careful. When you're barbecuing, one thing that you can do around your house is start to clear out all that dead foliage.
And be sure to stay tuned to Fox 7 on air and online for the latest alerts.
If there's a burn ban going on or a red flag warning, we're going to let you know about it.
Thanks for joining us for this Fox 7 Storm Watch. To stay up to date on the latest weather alerts, be sure to download the Fox 7 Austin weather app. That's our time for tonight. Have a great evening.